So how many of you live in Los Angeles or know someone who lives out there? Or perhaps you've just seen it on television. Well, what we do know is that today crime is on the upswing in the city of Angels. And what happens, of course, when the going gets tough and the police have basically been discouraged out there from doing their job aggressively? They've kind of been told to stand down in many respects. Well, of course, we know what happens. Things get worse. You see, in cities where people care about the rule of law, they generally look to law enforcement, like the police departments, to enforce the laws. But law enforcement, when they do enforce the laws, as a general matter, they drive down the rate of crime. Makes sense, right? But in the great woke city of Los Angeles, they have decided, apparently, to go in a different direction. And that is the case with some of the police officers out there, or at least parts of the police agencies, as best I can tell. They appear to be on board, whether they like it or not, with basically kind of depolicing or being less aggressive in enforcing the laws. So guess what's happening in Los Angeles as a result of this? Well, needless to say, crime is on the rise. But what's very interesting, of course, is that thousands of liberal, hardcore Democratic voters, right, Los Angeles is a Democratic area, they're going out there and buying guns, according to news reports. Now, these new gun owners apparently have gotten the message that they are their own first responder, a message that you on this channel are well familiar with because I talk about it quite a bit. More on this when we get back. Hey folks, I'm Mark, and welcome to the Four Boxes Diner. It might not come as much of a surprise to many of you out there to hear that crime is on the rise across the country. And it has been really in many parts of America since the start of the pandemic, the onset of the 2020 riots, and the general economic despair we've seen in parts of the country thanks to the current economic climate, which includes, of course, high rates of inflation and supply chain problems. But if you live in sort of a pro-gun red state, you know, you probably actually haven't been seeing as much of this outside of your door as some other places in the country. And that's because I think that there's a lot of common sense support out there in support of law enforcement and individuals' right to defend themselves. And as a consequence in these places, red states in particular, this kind of policy or attitude stops many criminals in their tracks. They're deterred from engaging in bad, violent behavior. Okay? But this is not the case in places like Los Angeles. You see, the crime spike has sent thousands of people in the LA area, in particular Beverly Hills residents, that's really rich, right? The majority of which are historically anti-Second Amendment people, I would say, to their local gun store to buy themselves firearms. This is very interesting, right? That you have an area that is particularly kind of anti-gun, anti-Republican, anti-Donald Trump, anti-conservative, right? They vote for a lot of these people that are now enforcing or maybe not enforcing the laws the way they should be. And guess what happens? You have a hike in crime, and what do these same voters apparently do? Well, they're going run out there and they're trying to get themselves firearms. Apparently, they're learning the hard way what you've learned on this channel, in some ways, the easy way, and that is you and we are our own first responders. Now, according to Los Angeles County Sheriff Alejandro Villanueva, his sheriff's department has received 8,105 concealed carry weapon applications. That was just recent data. And he's approved 2,102 of them since he took office in December of 2018. Now, I want to put this into some perspective. His predecessor only issued 194 permits over a period of 4 years. Not a lot of guns out there in Los Angeles, at least in terms of legal concealed carry. Now, I want to actually give you a quote from one of the residents out there in the LA area who explains why there seems to be this increase in interest in owning firearms. The quote goes like this, quote, "It's gone to the point where residents feel insecure even going from their door to their car." That's what one of the residents says. She continues by saying, "A lot of residents are applying for a concealed carry permit, even though that's a great challenge in LA County." And I'm sure it is, by the way. I'm sure it's very difficult to get a concealed carry permit in the LA area. Now, From my point of view, it is very hard for me, and probably for many of you, to try not to say, hey, we told you so. We told you what was going to happen if you discourage gun ownership in a particular area, and then you told the cops, slow down, don't be aggressive, don't actively, robustly enforce criminal laws. We kind of know what was going to happen, right? But what's interesting is it appears that the anti-gunners would rather that the Los Angeles residents simply throw up their hands and just accept their fate. But people know better when it comes to their own lives. And that's why they're turning to their Second Amendment and their Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms. The Los Angeles Police Department, as best I can tell, seems to be really only exacerbating this problem. In November of 2021, the LAPD issued what I consider to be very uncomfortable advice to its concerned citizens. Here's their exact wording. Quote, if you are being robbed, do not resist the robbery suspects. Cooperate and comply with their demands. Be a good witness. What are they talking about? Here you have the Los Angeles Police Department, responsible for public safety in Los Angeles, telling its citizens of that city to comply. Do not resist. Focus on being a good witness and filing a detailed police report. Well, for a citizen in a city that's plagued with increased robberies, the LAPD says you only have one option: to comply. It's no wonder that thousands of LA residents want concealed carry permits, because they, when it comes to their lives, may not be so excited about taking that advice from the LA Police Department. As they often say, reality can be a very difficult teacher because it gives you the test first and then the lesson or education afterwards. No one obviously deserves to be robbed or burgled or killed or otherwise violently imperiled by criminals or otherwise. But when famous philanthropists are being killed in their home, people like Jacqueline Avant, a very famous person in Los Angeles, even the hardcore anti-gunners have to go out there and say to themselves, what are we doing out here in Los Angeles? What's going on in the city? And that's, I think, a big reason why we're seeing a lot of the, generally speaking, I would say anti-gun viewpoints out in Los Angeles turning a little bit, as we see a lot of the folks out there going to try to buy guns because they want to be able to defend themselves. In fact, again, keep in mind that more than 1,800 people were shot in Los Angeles in 2021, which is up considerably from 1,530, which was that number in 2020. Homicides out there are up nearly 50% between January to October 2020 versus 2021. So a huge jump there. Again, no shock that violent crime is on the rise in many parts of the country, especially those blue areas that are trying to quote unquote defund or reimagine the police, or whatever euphemism they're using to basically say to the police, stand down and let the criminals do their thing. So what has the city of Los Angeles done about this? Well, they really, believe it or not, cut the police budget. That's the first thing they did. Why would you do that? Their budget was defunded by $150 million over the past year. And they now have 500 fewer police officers than they did in December of 2020. A private security executive reports on the wealthy members of the Beverly Hills area, showing really they have some doubts on their anti-gun doctrine. Here's his quote: even hardcore leftist Democrats who've said to me in the past, never own a gun, are calling me to ask about firearms. I'd say there's been an increase of 80% in the number of requests that I'm getting this year. So what can we learn from this? Well, here's the big takeaway. If crime comes knocking and the anti-gunners are not willing to stop it, you, as you know from this channel, are your own first responder, like it or not. Only you can ensure your safety and the safety of your loved ones. No matter how rich you are, no matter how famous you are, in Los Angeles or otherwise, you are your own first responder. And the LAPD probably is not going to be coming if you're out there in Los Angeles, at least in any timely fashion, as best I can tell. Except, of course, maybe to take a report after the fact. And that's not acceptable, because you don't want to be the person that the police draw a chalk line around on the ground. That's not the optimal outcome. The optimal outcome, of course, is that you get to remain alive, and any violent thug that is trying to do harm to you or your family or friends or your neighbors, they are thwarted before they are able to do harm, injury, or cause death. Now, I have to just mention this anecdote out there in Los Angeles because it's in many respects very funny. It's quite hilarious if it weren't so serious, okay? So what happened out there involving two police officers in the Los Angeles Police Department? Well, believe it or not, two officers just tried to appeal a ruling where they had been fired after they had failed to respond promptly to a robbery that was in progress out there. In fact, the court filings to this case, and I'll try to put links to the story down below in the description of this video, the court filings detailed how two of these police officers actually ignored calls to provide backup in regard to a pending robbery. But why? Why are they doing it? Why did they not show up for the robbery? What were they doing instead? Well, it turns out they were on their phones chasing a Pokémon Snorlax. That's right, they were playing a video game. Instead of attending to citizens being robbed in Los Angeles, these police officers were caught audibly ignoring the call for them to report to the crime. Why? Because they wanted to play and continue playing their Pokémon GO game. Looks like they have their priorities figured out, and it's not your safety. So what can you do? That's the question. What can you do when your safety or that of your family is put in jeopardy? Well, you can either give up, put your hands in the air and comply, the Mahatma Gandhi approach, I like to say, or you can take measures to protect yourself and your family in a proactive way. Now, to me, if you want to be an effective first responder, you need to take advantage of and understand your Second Amendment rights to keep and bear arms, among other things, because at the end of the day, it's your fundamental God-given right to defend yourself against all forms of tyranny, including those by criminals and terrorists and other thugs that would do you harm and your family harm. And you should exercise this right and protect yourself, because many of the typical anti-gunners in the Los Angeles area have now apparently realized what I'm saying is true. And I expect that more and more will continue to understand the importance of the Second Amendment's right to keep and bear arms as they see crime rates continue to rise. And either they or someone they know become crime victims, because the more they feel viscerally the consequences of lax policing and politicians that are discouraging robust policing. I think you'll see, crime continue to rise, and I think that breakdown in society in a way is going to cause more people to say, I've got to take care of myself because no one's coming if I need 911 or support against a criminal that wants to hurt me or my family. So I think we should all be paying attention to what's going to go on in Los Angeles in the months ahead, because it may teach us a lot of lessons going forward for other communities here in the United States. Okay, so I hope you learned something here today at the Four Boxes Diner. And again, thanks for joining us here at the Four Boxes Diner, where we serve hot, fresh Second Amendment news and analysis. And again, if you like what you heard, please help us spread the word and subscribe to this channel. That really helps us spread the word and get the algorithm to encourage that our videos get pushed out to more and more people. And we appreciate that if you can help us do that. So until next time, we'll see you soon at the Four Boxes Diner.
Orders up. Table 2A.